All opinions expressed on any program are those of the producer and or persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of DCTV. All producers and guests appearing on programs provide information and opinions based on information they consider to be reliable. DCTV does not affirm the completeness and accuracy. All DCTV members agree to adhere to DCTV's statement of compliance and are participants in a community medium forum where they're exercising their freedom of speech.
Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis. Welcome to the series on the network of global corporate control. Today's segment is pre-recorded. We are going to talk about the Central Intelligence Agency, thanks to DCTV, to Carmen Stanley, Project Director, Maurice Jackson, Studio Director, and Maurice is in the studio today. Last week I said I wasn't sure whether Carmen was there, but it was actually Mo all the time. And Cruchet Starnes is on audio and teleprompter. I want to remind you that Google was created by the CIA. Why did the CIA make Google? To dominate the world through control of information. Do we stand a chance when we're up against these heavy hitters? You bet. That's because we are part of a coalition that is backed by the military powers of the world and the wealth of the world. We have reality on our side. What's more, we learn from our mistakes. Last week, I told you about how the bankers who make our fake, corrupt paper currency tried to kill me and missed. They'd been threatening to arrest me with Interpol and never seemed to get around to it. That's because Interpol is part of the corrupt system that is coming down and that is overpowered by our coalition to clean up this corruption. One of the lessons I learned was when someone sent me a message, TLDR. I found out this meant too long, didn't read. I answered the message with a picture, which, if it's not on the screen, you couldn't see it in the teleprompter. We're in a big dialogue on the internet. I tweeted, "All the world's a stage, and this truth is keeping us out of World War III," about the fact that Vladimir Putin had worked for the KGB. You remember, all of the intelligence agencies are really working for the network of global corporate control out of Switzerland. So one of my followers, Fat5, tweeted a picture in response. And again, if it's not behind me on the screen, you can see that picture in the teleprompter. It shows Putin as the head of the Wizard of Oz. In the teleprompter that I put in my social media and in the first section on YouTube behind the Show More button, you'll find backup information. A veiled threat from the CIA. In 2016, I had not yet learned that the CIA is headquartered in Switzerland and works for the Banking Cartel. The bankers broke the link showing how the CIA tried to bribe me. There's no doubt about the corrupt CIA is harpooned. In the teleprompter, I've put information showing you how the CIA tried to steal the world's wealth in the global debt facility. Background information showing you that the CIA is headquartered in Switzerland and doesn't protect the security of the United States. The CIA's offices in Langley, Virginia, are simply a branch office and not their headquarters. The CIA had the nerve to ask one of its agents, a kid who I helped raise, to call me up and threaten me and my family. I said to Scott Browning, I worked at the bank for over 20 years, and they hoped I would go away and shut up. I was hoping instead that somehow you knew someone at your old employer who might listen to reason. It's hard to get through to those folks. I also put information about how a Marine Expeditionary Unit landed on the CIA's lawn in Langley, Virginia on the 17th of November 2017. The CIA tried to bribe me with 1 million shares in CMKX. Well, that didn't work, did it? Last week, a shill tried to attack my credibility by saying that CMKX was going to be funded. Well, folks, the source of the funding for CMKX is the Global Debt Facility. I don't think we want to fund CMKX, do we? We're going to have fun with this one. Now, for the rest of the show, I'm going to speak extemporaneously. Okay, so what happened with the CIA is they tried to bribe me, and I showed you a picture of the CMKX shares, which, yes, they did mail me those shares, but I'm not going to fund them. And anybody that has CMKX isn't going to be funded either, because the only funding is CMKX was set up by the CIA, and the CIA was hoping it was going to be funded through the Global Debt Facility, and they thought if they bribed me with CMKX, I was going to fund it. Well, I figured out what was going on, and no, I'm not interested in funding CMKX, and I'm not interested in a bribe. Now, you can ask yourself, why is it that I'm not interested in a bribe? And you can also ask yourself, why is it that I'm not afraid of the CIA? Some people say, well, I obviously had to be part of the CIA or I would be frightened. But it just so happens that I don't get frightened. Why is it that I don't get frightened? I really can't tell you this, but that's just the way I'm built. When you try to threaten me, what usually happens is I dig in my heels. I'm just built that way. Many times my family, when they would try to keep me out of trouble, were wondering what I was thinking. But that's, as I said, if you go back and if you look at the various things through the chronology that I've showed you a very detailed chronology, you'll see that I'm really not very impressed when people try to dominate me. I just don't go there. I think it's probably a personality defect, but be it as it may, that's just the way it is. And, you know, you may also wonder why somebody with the responsibility that I have, why they would put a woman in that role and not a man. And I can tell you what my thoughts are. There were many, many times that they were sending me really very attractive men. These were people that, when I was in my heyday, wouldn't have given me, you know, a second look. And I just wasn't impressed. Why is it that I'm not impressed? I think that's just I'm not impressed. I'd much rather have fun in my own way. So what I would do when they would send me these people to try to seduce me, what I would do is I would let them think that I was going to go along with what they were trying, and then I would walk away. I would just get in a cab, or, you know, I would make my way loose out of that situation. And when I went to Japan in 2014, I was living in a guest house. It was like a hotel, and right across from me there was some guy. And every time I would go out, because they didn't have their own bathrooms, you'd have to go and use a community bathroom. So I would walk down the hall to the bathroom, and this guy would be standing there for no good reason, without a shirt on. And at that point I realized that people were eavesdropping on me. So what I did was I said, they put somebody across the hall from me, but this guy is really not very good looking at all. So, yeah, I'm not going to be bribed, and I'm not going to be seduced, and I'm just going to do my job. And I enjoy that very much. And you can see also, I enjoy talking to you. And the reason that I'm doing this unscripted is because people want to know who they're dealing with. Because it's a pretty impressive enterprise that we're embarked on. We're taking down corruption that has been in place since 9200 BC. And in some of the videos that I've been showing you, I show you how we know. We had a date stamp. The people that built Khufu Pyramid put a sky map, and there was no way to get in there and look at it for somebody to try to forge that. So yeah, we know how long this corruption has lasted, and it's pretty impressive. Sometimes people want to know why it is all of a sudden we're managing to get rid of corruption that has been in place through the earliest time, going back really far. And I'll tell you what my theory is, but I've also said that during the global currency reset, people are not really going to be that interested in my theory. They're going to be theories. They're going to want to find out for themselves. They're going to all work together to find out what's what. And that's very good. And as I said, I stand ready to be corrected all the time. The reason why I think my opinion might be interesting is because a lot of people have figured out that I've got this job to try to get the world's wealth, to use it to clean up the corruption that's been in place for all these thousands of years. So they come and they tell me interesting things. And a lot of the people that have been telling me these things are what we call controlled opposition. They figured if they told me really interesting things, that I would rely on them. And there's a whole history of people that have told me very, very interesting things. You had Wolfgang Struck, you had Banking Cartel, you had the people from YCT, that's a company that's Chinese that came out of Taiwan. And so what I would do is I would take the information and I would sift through it. And when they would do things that just didn't make sense, I'd give them the boot because they were telling me things that didn't make sense. And finally, they figured out that it wasn't working. And indeed, it hasn't been working because it's pretty clear that humanity is now in charge. We're now in charge. And I'm just holding the place through, because somebody has to do this job. Not because I'm particularly good at it, although I've been doing my best and I've been learning from my mistakes. I've made some pretty serious mistakes, but I've also admitted to my mistakes. And I've also said, look, I'm not taking this job because I want it. I'm taking it because somebody has to do it, and I'll just do my best. Now, one of the things that I said recently was that I said I can't be in charge of all of this stuff, so people themselves have got to pick up the ball and run with it. But then I realized that there can be chaos as well if it's not clear what the sequencing is. So I certainly don't want to abdicate what I don't want there to be a lot of chaos when there doesn't have to be. And so what we're having now is we're having a dialogue, and we're going to be discussing all of these things, no holds barred. I'll be as transparent as I know how. And one of my characteristics is that I don't like to be secret. It's just as I'm somebody who is not likely to be intimidated, and and I'm not somebody who's likely to be seduced. I'm also not going to act in secret. And you've seen through the years, you've seen how I act, and I'm also open to criticism. I'm very open to criticism. One of the traits that I have is it's something called, it's the opposite of uncertainty avoidance, which is to say, I'm not going to jump to conclusions. I'm going to sit and wait to see how things play out. And so I'm not going to brand somebody as something without giving them a chance to show me that they're not what I thought at all. So when I'm calling somebody an agent or controlled opposition, I'm also looking to see what it is that they do. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, I'm going to think it's a duck. But if it then stops quacking and does something else, I'll be open to see what it's actually doing. And so that's the way we're going to be working in the global currency reset, working together. We're just going to be sorting things through. We have all the time in the world. In the beginning, I thought that we were going to have to work before the U.S. paper dollar from the Federal Reserve. That's not the real currency of the United States. It's not according to the Constitution. We're supposed to have real coins as our currency. We're not supposed to have paper. So I thought that the paper was going to crash and we had to work quickly. And now I realize, no, it's not going to crash. And the reason why we have all the time in the world is because we're in control of the world's wealth. We're not in control of the world's military, but the world's military is keeping peace while we sort things through. And we're going to take just as long as we need to take. And what I said a while ago was, I'll be here as long as I'm here, and I'll do my best as long as I'm here. But other people can replace me. I'm not, I'm not that special. But the point is, there's likely to be confusion when we look for a successor, or when somebody else would have to look for a successor if I'm no longer on the scene. So I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to shirk my job. And some people think, well, it must be a lot of fun. And there are things, let's face it, there are things that are a lot of fun. But there are also things that nobody would envy me. And I'll give you a for instance. And that is that the threats to my family and the weapons that are used against my family. That's no fun whatsoever. But I can't walk away from this job because we would have World War III. And it's very clear, if you pay attention, that yes, we would have World War III. And where would we have World War III? Any number of conflicts. But the first and the best one is Syria. That's where the Banking Cartel thought that they were going to start World War III. But there are also so many other conflicts. I've been hearing, without wanting to listen to it, some of this theater that's going on between Democrats and Republicans. The Banking Cartel is doing what it can to create conflicts wherever it can. And in Europe, with all of the people that have been brought in to live in Europe, this is making it very conflict-ridden. So, yes, we have to realize that we're not going to have conflicts break out. And one of the things that you can see is that if a conflict was going to break out, it would have broken out in any number of flashpoints. In the United States, one of the flashpoints is the racial divide. In almost every single society, one of the places where there's a lot of conflict is in the religions. That's also one of the reasons that we're not going to be dealing with these conflicts. We're going to let them simmer. We don't have to resolve these conflicts. immediately, we can get rid of the corruption in our currency, and then we can try to tackle the problems later. And this is also very serious, because we're talking about spirituality, we're talking about good and evil, we're talking about things where people do want to have some kind of certainty. And that's where we get into this business about uncertainty avoidance. It's going to be very important to live with ambiguity until we can tackle these issues. And we have to sequence, and we have to get rid of the corruption first. And the reason that we have to do this is because we're going to have World War III if we don't. And nobody wants World War III. So, yeah, we're in this together. And we're also on a one-way street, because as soon as people start realizing the extent of the corruption, and enough of us have, there's no way to undo that understanding. When some people talk about a red pill, some people talk about a matrix. It's all really saying that that there's so much corruption that the old certainties don't apply anymore. And when you know that you've been duped, to the extent that you've been duped, you almost have a vested interest in saying, well, it can't be as corrupt as all that. So I'm just going to keep on thinking whatever I used to think, even though there are some people who are telling me that I'm a dupe. Now, that's not a nice word, but it happens to be correct. If reality is extremely different from what you thought, and you're refusing to see it, that's what you are. You're duped. It may not be your fault that you are duped, but that's what the actual situation is. So we're going to take as long as it takes, with peace, until we manage to reach out to enough people. And the best way, of course, to get people to understand where they actually are and what the actual situation is to have these conversations. What I did this past week was I went to a dog park, and I was talking to 3 of the owners of dogs, and one of them was kind of receptive to what I was talking to them about. One of them was, I believe they were a spy, and one of them was a person who, no matter what I said, couldn't hear me. It was clear they were just not able to hear me. And that's a person who's very sensitive to mind control technology, and there's no way to get through to them except their loved ones. If their loved ones are able to understand what the reality is, that person ultimately is going to understand what reality actually is. And what John F. Kennedy said, a rising tide lifts all boats. For the people who are so susceptible to mind control technology that they're not able to reason for themselves, then they're going to end up, when the tide rises, realizing that there's a different reality. So that's where we are. And I'm also doing my best to show people what reality is. And you can see on the many things that I write. Perhaps I write too many things. And we're going to find out in the comments section to the last week video and this segment, because right now we're retaping for next week when this is actually going to appear. We're going to find out, we're going to get guidance. And as you've seen, I do take guidance. So we're actually all in charge. We're all going to be working together on this effort. And there's nowhere to go because we are in reality. And the reason that we're in reality is enough people understand what reality is. So even though the corruption has lasted for more than centuries, for millennia, it doesn't matter. It's coming down because we're on a one-way street. And As I've said so many times, reality is reality. Now, I'm going to look through my notes to see what else would make sense for me to talk to you about. How people tried to kick me off the internet. You can see there's been any number of direct conflicts where people are dumbfounded that nobody seems to be making any headway. So, for example, in 2014, when the federal government of the United States, they tried to kick me off the internet, and I got a phone call saying, you're not going to be allowed to go on the internet for, in a couple of hours. And so what I did was I reached out to Montgomery County, to the county executive, and I said, they can't do that. They can't take me off the internet. And lo and behold, I stayed on the internet. Now that's pretty impressive. Or if you look at the conflict that I've been having with the World Bank, because that's, as I said, that's one of the indicators. If you want to see whether we're making progress, that's one of the indicators. Let's be very clear. Generations and thousands of valiant Filipinos have lost their lives fighting the United States occupation of the Philippines. We're not talking about the right of the people in the Philippines to govern themselves without colonial occupation. What we are talking about right now is the right of people in every single country to be free of country debt. We're also talking about whether there's going to be a World War III or whether there's a global currency reset, which will give people all over the world the chance to end the secret domination of the network of global corporate control. We are actually following the recipe in the power transition model that came to the World Bank from the United States National War College in 2004, and which has a 90 to 95% degree of accuracy. In the words of Henry Haskins, a failed trader on Wall Street, what lies behind us and what lies ahead of us are tiny matters to what lies within us.